What happens when one of the world's most controversial billionaires sits down with daytime television's most outspoken panel? You won't believe what unfolds when Elon Musk's appearance on The View turns into an absolute disaster that has everyone talking. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. This was a powder keg waiting to explode, and when it did, the fallout was nothing short of spectacular. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two worlds collide in the most dramatic fashion possible. Last night's episode of The View was supposed to be a straightforward sit-down with tech mogul Elon Musk, but what viewers witnessed instead was a complete meltdown that ended with security being called and one of the most dramatic exits in the show's history. The tension was palpable from the moment Musk walked onto that stage, and by the time the cameras stopped rolling, everyone knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The trouble started almost immediately when Whoopi Goldberg introduced Musk with what seemed like a perfectly normal welcome. "We're here with Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, and owner of X, formerly known as Twitter," she announced, her voice carrying just a hint of edge that those familiar with The View would recognize as a warning sign. "Thanks for joining us today, Elon." Musk settled into his chair with that familiar smirk, adjusting his jacket as he looked around the panel. "Thanks for having me," he replied, his tone casual, but with an underlying cockiness that immediately set the hosts on edge. "Though I have to say, I'm a little surprised you still call it Twitter. I thought journalists were supposed to stay current with the news." The comment hung in the air like a challenge, and you could practically feel the temperature in the studio drop several degrees. Joy Behar was the first to respond, her voice sharp with barely contained irritation. "Well, some of us remember when social media platforms actually cared about protecting their users instead of turning them into playgrounds for hate speech." Hate speech? Musk's eyebrows shot up, and that smirk widened into something more aggressive. "Or do you mean free speech? Because there's a difference, though I understand why that might be confusing for people who've spent their careers in echo chambers." Sarah Haynes tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground, leaning forward with a diplomatic smile. "Elon, you've been very vocal about your views on various social issues. Can you help us understand your perspective on transgender rights, particularly given some of the changes you've made to content moderation on your platform?" The question was posed carefully, professionally, but Musk's entire demeanor shifted. His relaxed posture stiffened, and his eyes narrowed as he looked directly at Haynes. My perspective is that we've gone completely insane as a society. We're talking about permanent, irreversible medical procedures on children, and anyone who dares to question it gets labeled a transphobe." The studio fell silent for a moment, the kind of silence that occurs when everyone realizes they're about to witness something they'll never forget. Sunny Hostin was the first to break it, her voice steady but with steel underneath. "Elon, transgender children and their families work with medical professionals to make carefully considered decisions. These aren't casual choices, and spreading misinformation about gender-affirming care is incredibly harmful." "Misinformation?" Musk laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The misinformation is pretending that pumping kids full of hormones and performing irreversible surgeries is healthcare. It's child abuse, and the fact that we can't even have an honest conversation about it without being canceled shows how far we've fallen." Alyssa Farah Griffin jumped in, her voice rising with emotion. "You have a transgender daughter, Elon. How can you sit there and say these things when you have a child who's part of this community?" The mention of his daughter hit Musk like a physical blow. His face darkened, and for a moment, the carefully constructed public persona cracked, revealing something raw and angry underneath. "Don't you dare bring my family into this. My child has been manipulated by activists and a broken system that profits from confusion and pain. Your child chose to distance themselves from you." Whoopi interjected, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Maybe instead of blaming activists and systems, you should look in the mirror and ask why your own daughter doesn't want to be associated with you." The comment landed like a bomb. Musk's hands clenched into fists on the table, and his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You have no idea what you're talking about. None of you do. You sit here in your little bubble, virtue signaling about tolerance and acceptance while you attack anyone who doesn't conform to your narrow worldview." Joy Behar wasn't backing down. "We're not attacking anyone. We're defending the rights of people to exist as their authentic selves. But you've turned your platform into a megaphone for hate, and now you're sitting here trying to justify it. Hate. Musk's voice was getting louder now, his control slipping with each exchange. I'm trying to protect children from a medical scandal that will be remembered as one of the worst chapters in healthcare history. But you're so invested in your political narrative that you can't see the damage you're causing. The panel was no longer trying to maintain the pretense of a civil interview. Sarah Haynes leaned forward, her voice intense. The damage is coming from people like you who use your massive platform to spread fear and misinformation. Do you have any idea how many transgender kids have been bullied, attacked, or driven to self-harm because of the rhetoric you amplify? Self-harm. Musk's eyes flashed with anger. You want to talk about self-harm? How about the kids who are sterilized before they're old enough to vote? How about the children who regret their transitions but can't talk about it because people like you have made it impossible to have an honest conversation? Sunny Hostin's voice was trembling with controlled fury. Regret rates for gender-affirming care are extremely low, and the vast majority of transgender people report improved mental health outcomes. But you're cherry-picking isolated cases to justify your prejudice. Prejudice. Musk stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm trying to protect kids, and you're calling me prejudiced? This is exactly the problem. You've created a world where asking questions or expressing concerns makes you a bigot. The studio was electric with tension now, cameras capturing every moment of the escalating confrontation. Whoopi's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. Sit down, Elon. You came on this show, and you're going to finish this conversation like an adult. But Musk was beyond diplomacy now, his face flushed with anger and frustration. Adult? You want to talk about being an adult? Adults don't mutilate children and call it healthcare. Adults don't destroy families and call it liberation. The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down, and every host on the panel knew that whatever happened next would define not just this interview, but potentially the entire future of how these conversations would be handled on television. The battle lines were drawn, and neither side was backing down. Alyssa Farah Griffin was the first to find her voice, her hands trembling with barely contained rage. Mutilate children? Did you just say mutilate children? You're talking about healthcare that saves lives, healthcare that's supported by every major medical organization in the world. Musk's laugh was bitter and cruel. Supported by organizations that profit from it, you mean? Follow the money, Alyssa. This whole industry is built on creating customers for life. They're not saving anyone. They're creating dependence. That's a disgusting conspiracy theory. Joy Behar snapped, her voice rising to a shout. You're sitting here spreading the same lies that get transgender people killed. You have blood on your hands, Elon. Blood on my hands. Musk's voice cracked with fury. I have blood on my hands. What about the blood of the children who kill themselves because they realized too late that they were sold a lie? What about the detransitioners who are ignored and silenced because they don't fit your narrative? Sarah Haynes stood up now, matching Musk's aggressive posture. The suicide rates you're talking about are highest among transgender youth who don't receive support from their families. Kids who are rejected by parents like you. Parents like me? Musk's face was red now, veins visible in his neck. I'm trying to save my child from a cult that wants to destroy everything natural and beautiful about being human. But you've poisoned the well so thoroughly that even questioning this madness makes me the villain. Whoopi slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing through the studio like a gunshot. Enough. You will not sit on this show and call transgender people a cult. You will not spread hatred and call it love. That stops right now. But Musk was beyond listening to reason, his composure completely shattered. Hatred? You want to talk about hatred? Look at what you've done to women's sports. Look at what you've done to women's spaces. Look at what you've done to the very concept of what it means to be a woman. Oh, now we're getting to the real issue, Sunny Hostin said, her voice dripping with disdain. This isn't about protecting children at all. This is about your fear that the world is changing and you can't control it anymore. Control? Musk laughed maniacally. I don't want to control anything. I want to preserve basic biological reality. I want to protect women from being erased. I want to protect children from being sterilized. But you've made it impossible to even say these things without being branded a monster. The audience was completely silent now, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Security guards had quietly positioned themselves near the stage, though none of the participants seemed to notice. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of the meltdown. Alyssa leaned forward, her voice low and dangerous. You know what makes you a monster, Elon? The fact that you have a platform that reaches millions of people and you use it to spread fear and hatred against some of the most vulnerable people in our society. Vulnerable? Musk's eyes blazed with fury. The most vulnerable people are the children being fed hormones like candy, the girls losing scholarships to biological males, the women losing their spaces to men who claim to be women. But you don't care about them because they don't fit your political agenda. Sarah's voice was shaking with emotion. Trans women are women, Elon. Trans men are men. These are people's identities, their very existence, and you're trying to erase them. I'm trying to preserve the meaning of words. Musk shouted, his control completely gone now. Woman used to mean something. Female used to mean something. But you've decided that feelings matter more than facts, that ideology matters more than biology. Joy stood up, pointing an accusing finger at Musk. The only ideology here is your hatred. You can dress it up in concerns about children or women's rights, but at the end of the day, you just can't accept that transgender people exist and deserve dignity. Dignity. Musk's voice was hoarse with rage. Where's the dignity in lying to children about their bodies? Where's the dignity in telling a confused teenager that they were born in the wrong body? Where's the dignity in destroying families who won't go along with this insanity? Whoopi's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The only thing destroying families is parents who can't love their children for who they are. Parents who choose ideology over their own flesh and blood. The personal attack hit Musk like a physical blow. His face contorted with pain and fury. And for a moment, it looked like he might actually strike someone. You don't know anything about my family. You don't know what it's like to watch your child be turned against you by people who profit from division and confusion. Your child wasn't turned against you, Sonny said coldly. Your child saw who you really are and made a choice. That's not manipulation. That's clarity. The studio was crackling with tension now, the confrontation having moved far beyond anything resembling a normal interview. Production assistants were frantically signaling from the wings, but the hosts were too deep in the battle to notice. Musk was pacing now, his hands gesturing wildly as he spoke. This whole movement is built on lies. The lie that sex is assigned at birth instead of observed. The lie that puberty blockers are reversible. The lie that this is about love and acceptance instead of ideology and money. The only lies here are coming from you. Alyssa shot back. You're repeating talking points from hate groups and calling it science. Hate groups? Musk whirled around to face her. You mean parents who don't want their children sterilized? You mean women who don't want to share locker rooms with biological males? You mean anyone who believes in basic biological reality? Sarah's voice was shaking with anger. You're talking about people's children, Elon. Real kids who are struggling with their identity, who need support and love, not parents who see them as ideological battlegrounds. They need protection from predators who see them as profit centers. Musk spat. They need parents who will love them enough to say no to irreversible medical procedures. They need adults who will tell them the truth instead of feeding them lies. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both sides hurling accusations and personal attacks. The carefully constructed facade of daytime television civility had completely crumbled, replaced by raw emotion and genuine hatred. Whoopi stood up, her voice commanding attention. This ends now. You've said enough. You've spread enough hatred and misinformation. It's time for you to leave. But Musk wasn't finished. His eyes were wild with rage and desperation, and he pointed at each host in turn. You're all complicit in child abuse. History will judge you for what you've done to an entire generation of children. The accusation hung in the air like a death sentence, and everyone in the studio knew that whatever happened next would be remembered forever. Joy Behar was the first to recover from the shock, her voice trembling with absolute fury. Did you just accuse us of child abuse? Did you just sit on our show and call us child abusers? Musk's chest was heaving, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and what looked like genuine desperation. If the shoe fits, you're cheerleading for the mutilation of children, and you're doing it with a smile on your faces. That was the breaking point. Whoopi stood up so fast her chair nearly toppled over, her voice booming across the studio. Get out. Get out right now. You do not come on this show and accuse us of harming children. You do not spread your hatred and call it love. Security. But Musk was beyond caring about consequences now. His voice rose to match Whoopi's, his words coming out in a torrent of rage. The truth hurts, doesn't it? You can't handle anyone questioning your sacred ideology. You'd rather destroy careers and families than admit you might be wrong. Security guards were moving toward the stage now, but Sarah Haynes stepped forward, blocking their path. Her voice was deadly calm, which somehow made it more terrifying than if she had been screaming. You want to talk about destroying families? Let's talk about how you've destroyed your relationship with your own daughter. Let's talk about how your hatred has cost you your child. The words hit Musk like a physical blow. His face went white, then red, then white again. You don't know what you're talking about, he whispered, his voice barely audible. You have no idea what I've lost. We know exactly what you've lost, Alyssa said, her voice filled with contempt. You've lost your child because you chose hate over love. You chose ideology over family. And now you're trying to justify it by attacking other families. Musk's hands were shaking now, whether from rage or something else, no one could tell. My child was stolen from me by activists who convinced her that I was the enemy. They turned her against me before I even knew what was happening. No one turned anyone against you. Sonny shot back. Your child saw who you really are and made a choice. That's not manipulation. That's self-preservation. The studio audience was completely silent now, some people covering their mouths in shock, others filming with their phones despite the no-recording policy. This had gone far beyond entertainment. This was a public breakdown happening in real time. Musk suddenly laughed, but it was a broken, bitter sound. Self-preservation? From her own father? Do you hear yourselves? You've created a world where children are encouraged to hate their parents if they don't immediately affirm every confused thought that pops into their heads. Confused thoughts. Joy's voice was shaking with rage. You're talking about people's core identity, their very sense of self. But you can't see past your own prejudice to understand that. Prejudice. Musk's voice cracked. I'm trying to save children from making irreversible mistakes. I'm trying to protect them from adults who see them as political pawns. Whoopi stepped closer to Musk, her voice low and dangerous. The only person using children as political pawns is you. You're using your own child's pain to justify your hatred of an entire community. My child's pain. Musk's voice rose to a near shriek. My child's pain is the result of being brainwashed by people like you. People who told her that her father was a monster for wanting to protect her. The confrontation had reached a crescendo of fury and desperation. Security guards were now flanking the stage, waiting for the word to intervene. Production assistants were frantically trying to get the attention of the hosts, but no one was backing down. Sarah stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. Your child's pain is the result of having a father who cares more about being right than being loving. A father who would rather wage war on social media than have a conversation with his own daughter. A conversation? Musk's laugh was hysterical now. How can you have a conversation with someone who's been taught that you're the enemy? How can you reach a child who's been told that your love is actually hate? Alyssa's voice was filled with disgust. Maybe if you had shown actual love instead of public rejection, things would be different. Maybe if you had supported your child instead of using them as a weapon in your culture war. That was the final straw. Musk's face contorted with rage, and he stepped toward Alyssa, his fists clenched. Don't you dare lecture me about love. Don't you dare sit there and judge me when you know nothing about what I've been through. Security immediately moved in, positioning themselves between Musk and the hosts. Sir, we need you to step back, one of them said firmly, but Musk was beyond reason now. He turned to face the entire panel, his voice hoarse with emotion. You're all complicit in one of the greatest scandals in medical history. You're cheerleading for the sterilization of children, and you're doing it because it makes you feel virtuous. The only scandal here is your hatred, Whoopi said coldly. The only tragedy is that you've let your prejudice destroy your family. Musk stood there for a moment, swaying slightly, his chest heaving. Then something seemed to break inside him. You know what? You're right. I have lost my child. But not because of hatred, because of people like you who convinced her that love looks like hate and hate looks like love. His voice dropped to a whisper, But in the dead silence of the studio, everyone could hear him. I hope you're happy. I hope destroying families makes you feel good about yourselves. Joy stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. We didn't destroy anything. You did that all by yourself when you chose to attack your own child's community instead of loving and supporting them. Musk looked around the studio one last time, his eyes wild and desperate. This isn't over. People are starting to see through your lies. Parents are starting to fight back. And when the lawsuits start, when the investigations begin, when the truth comes out about what you've done to children, remember this moment. The only thing people will remember, Sarah said quietly, is that you came on this show and revealed exactly who you are. A man so consumed with hatred that he destroyed his own family. That was it. Musk grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and started walking toward the exit, security guards flanking him. But he turned back one last time, his face twisted, with rage and pain. You can silence me, but you can't silence the truth. And the truth is that you're hurting children in the name of acceptance. History will judge you for what you've done. History will judge you for choosing hate over love, Whoopi called after him. History will judge you for losing your child to your own prejudice. Musk stormed toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. As he reached the door, he turned back one final time, his voice carrying across the studio with devastating clarity. I didn't lose my child to prejudice. I lost my child to people who convinced her that her father was the enemy. And someday, she'll realize what she's lost too. With that, he was gone, leaving behind a studio full of shocked faces and a confrontation that would be talked about for years to come. The host sat in stunned silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. Whoopi was the first to speak, her voice steady despite everything that had just occurred. We'll be right back after this break. As the cameras stopped rolling and the studio lights dimmed, everyone knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. A complete meltdown that revealed the true cost of hatred and the devastating power of choosing ideology over family. The confrontation was over, but the reverberations would be felt for a long time to come.